Oh, there we go. Now it's centered. Okay. Hi, everyone. Um, this is a video I thought about making Monday night after the Wings' first game against Montreal, the last home game for them of the season, which was an amazing game. Honestly, the most fun I've had watching hockey in the last decade, which, to be fair, has not been a lot because I've not watched a lot of hockey in the last decade. So it's very biased and very subjective. That said, wow, I just again, I'm here right now. I'm gonna kind of just go over those last two games of the season. The home and home with Montreal. Wow, what a way to end the season in both good and bad terms. Because as a Wings fan, I've not experienced this. Never really seen this because I was born in '87, so I grew up in an age of yes, we're a playoff team. We're perennially going to be in the playoffs. I mean, it was to me at the time for the next 25 years from 91 forward. But yeah, so I've always been in a spot as a fan of like, I can kind of relate to Toronto fans of like, yeah, the regular season's whatever. What are we doing in the playoffs? Like, that's all that really matters. And I will say is true amongst a lot of local fans. I've been guilty of this myself. It's like, yeah, regular season's whatever. Just what are we doing in the playoffs? Because I know we're getting to the playoffs, but what are we going to do from there? So I know that feeling. I know what it's like to be very spoiled um, as a fan of a team that's always in contention for a thing. So yeah, this year was definitely something special and unique. Again, for me as a Wings fan, because I've grown up in an era where it's the Wings are either a contending team in the playoffs to win a championship, or we're just out of the picture. It's one of the two. There's no real middle ground. This is a middle ground. We've been a bubble team now, I think, for the last couple of years. Really, this year especially. I think coming into it. Uh, Again, I'm gonna do a whole like post breakdown kind of dissection of the whole Wings season this year later on in the off season. Uh, Probably like during the playoffs, which I'm still gonna be watching because this year's playoffs are gonna be ridiculous um, to watch as a hockey fan because I don't know what's gonna happen. That's a whole different conversation. I'm gonna make a whole different video about like my bracket picks, which is gonna be just basically flipping a coin. I think in some cases. Um, anyway, before I get too off track, I will apologize right now. I meant to do it the previous video for the audio and video quality you're seeing right now because that can be improved very, very easily. I literally have the equipment sitting in the corner over there. You can't see it off camera, but I've had a microphone and light uh set like bought for this reason of broadcast of doing something akin to this. Um, yeah, I have a production background. I've had since I was a teenager. So yeah, production quality matters to me. That's why this stuff is very, it's very low rent. I'm not like, it works for now. It's why I haven't done more of it. 'Cause I'm like, I gotta get a proper set going. I'm very self-conscious in that kind of thing. Um, but anyway, before I ramble too much, and there's a reason I got really, really close. Like literally lights were on. I was ready to go to record something about the Wings win against Montreal Monday night because wow, what a game. That was super emotional and crazy. Some of them, again, the most I told some friends was afterward, the most fun I've had watching a hockey game in over a decade for sure was that game. The last home game Detroit had against Montreal, which again, on paper, we're, you know, 20 something plus points clear of them standings. What, like, shouldn't be a big deal. As I said previously in the last video, yeah, but I know my hockey. It really doesn't matter the rosters for Montreal, Detroit. It's going to be a thing. They have a young upcoming team. they're way out of the playoff picture, not even, not in the race. They still have something to play. This is the thing about any sports, whatever. They're still, and clearly, based on the teams we just saw, they were still playing to prove something, despite being out of the playoff race. They were not easy outs, not easy games, obviously, for the Red Wings. Or I think any team in that situation where you're dealing with the last two games of the season. It's going to be tight. Um, Even with teams out of the race, they're still, especially Montreal, there's a lot of young players that are playing for contracts. There's a lot of things going on there. Yeah, because I just thinking back, and this is why I didn't record a video in immediate response to either one of these games, because it would have been probably 40 something 5 minute, 45 minute is just me kind of ranting, figuring things out, thought processing in real time, which would have been fun to watch to an extent. I kind of want to keep these a little more shorter and concise and less just stream of consciousness and ranty and actually kind of they're still unscripted in one take. Um, because I like that style. Again, from coming from a production background, it's like, yeah, this is way easier and more effective. Just boop, one take, just one off real quick, and you're done. So I do like that style. Something I'm clearly been adopting. And again, I was very tempted. I had the lights out, I was ready to go. After that Detroit, that first game Monday night, it's like, wow, what a game. And I need to talk about this. But I was able to talk to a couple of friend of mine about it and just kind of vent that way. And I told myself too, I'm like, I already made a video that earlier that day, kind of previewing and my not hype, well, mixture of hype plus sort of just like nervousness going into those games. Like, I don't know if we're gonna win these ones. Like, we have to, but I just don't know if it's gonna happen. Kind of feeling. Um. So yes, I did think about making. Well, the reason I want to review this and do it my own style is not going to be, there's no whiteboard breakdown of like, here's all the scores and what happened period by period. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you probably already know the results of the game. You may not have watched it, but you're watching me talk about it. And I do want to go through my personal experience of seeing these games because that's what matters, I think, is again, what's my perspective? That's the unique thing I can lend to this conversation is what was I feeling looking at these games? And it was very interesting actually. And I'm really glad I waited to do something video wise until after both games had finished up because um, even after the first one with Montreal, I was like, this is such an emotional, miraculous kind of come from behind win, which the team's done quite a bit. Um, Actually, after the two games, I have to I'll look at the record. We may have not only tied, but maybe passed New York for third period wins or third period, come from behind wins for the season for any team in the league this year. Which is saying something. That's what we'll get into that in a little bit later. See, I don't want this to be too long and too rambly. I want to kind of stay on point about yeah. I don't want to. There's so many things tied up in all this, like end of the season, these two games, and there's a lot going on. That's why this will be. I already. One of the reasons I'm glad I kind of stopped and just like took a night to sleep about all this and think about it. It's like, yeah, no, I can cover those two Montreal games in one video, and then we can talk about the whole season. That's a whole, and we got a couple months here in the off season to talk about what happened and kind of break it down by segments and stuff like that, and look at how it played out. Um, because yeah, this is to circle back a thought I didn't finish earlier. Again, as a Red Wings fan since the early '90s, this is a unique thing that I have not seen in my lifetime. Because, like I said, the team's either been in column A or B, where either column A, Stanley Cup contenders, or column B, were way out of the playoffs and not even close. this is a situation where we're borderline, we're on the bubble. And, as I told some people, like literally Saturday afternoon, I told some people in my family, talking about hockey, yeah, there's a huge game tonight against Toronto at home on Saturday night, home for them. It's going to be, and they're a playoff. They're already locked in playoffs. They're a playoff team. They're a good team. And their top scorer is pressing for 70 goals. Like it's good. If we win that game, it will be a small miracle. And then, yes, we've got a home and home back to back games with Montreal to finish the year out. But still, even then, I'm like, I know on paper we should win both these games, but the reality of that's not going to be easy. And I knew that going in. Like, and I told people, like, even if we can run the gauntlet here and win and get 2 points in these last three games, get 6 points out of it, it may still not matter in the long term based on what other teams do because the current Eastern Conference playoff race, which is exactly kind of what happened. Um, so I should probably explain this shirt. The first, I think this is literally the first time I've worn this since 2009, since Game 7 of Pittsburgh Detroit and that series. But I'm wearing it now because, yeah, there are odd shades of that in the end of this season, but that's a longer conversation. But because I do want to focus on these two games. And again, my experience watching them. So let's actually get into that before I just keep sidetracking and ranting because I'm doing this live because the editing software had installed. I guess basically it was a one off. Like, hey, you can do one thing. You want to do more things, you got to give us money. So my solution was like, okay, I'll just bypass that and do a live stream, which will capture the video and I can do it one take. And I'm literally now forced to do it one take 'cause I'm doing it live. So whatever. Um, there's a better long term solution to that. I'll probably figure out, but right now I don't care. Um, anyway, let's get into my emotions and the whole. Just again, I'm not going to go by play or just scores or anything. I'm just going to go through my experience with these two games, the last two games of the year, and I think a very significant playoff year. But or not playoff year, but significant year for the franchise, and we'll get to that later on, or at the very end here. But yeah, Monday night, that first game going into Montreal, I'm like, well, by all odds against us, we beat Toronto, so, well, it's possible. Like, it's the hope of the dim light, the very dim light at the end of the tunnel is still there as a Red Wings fan. Like, it's possible. We really need to win these last few games against Montreal, and I know that on paper that seems easy based on the standings and points, but that don't underestimate Montreal late season. Same way you shouldn't underestimate the Wings late season. Just don't do that. Um, because sometimes teams that are out of the playoff race are the hardest teams to play at the end of the year. That's the whole thing. Um, so yeah, I was not expecting. Well, no one expected what happened. Give it that. But let's go into the first game. Which definitely had a certain air of tension and atmosphere to it that I have not really seen in a game in about probably 30 years since the 90s. Because again, we knew that like the season depended on like we got to win this game to stay in even in the conversation about playoffs this year. Even though it's lesser or postponent in Montreal, they're 20, 30 points behind us. But modern day NHL salary cap, all the parity, the difference between Detroit and Montreal, honestly, I mean, you can look at it on paper this year in the standings, say, oh, yeah, they're a much better team, and no problem beating them. In reality, they're actually a lot closer in terms of oh, skill level and compete, and just teams that can go win games when they need to. Um, so no, I knew going into it, even again, I was looking at the whole like, okay, we're playing Toronto Saturday night at home, and what's probably the Hockey Night in Canada game. That's huge. That's a huge, big game. That was what I was expecting. It was like, if we can get a point out of that game, I'd be happy. Like that would matter for the playoff race, and but I wasn't expecting Detroit to beat Toronto in that game. So that was a pleasant surprise. I'm like, okay, well, now we got to beat Montreal at home and home. Seems doable on paper. Maybe. I was not, but I've also watched this team all year long, especially the last quarter of the year. It's been a lot of mixed results, and my confidence in their ability to win games has not been as strong as it was early in the year. So I'm like, yeah, we gotta play Montreal. We have to win out. Like, again, okay, we beat Toronto, fine. We have to basically win both the games with Montreal to even have a chance, kind of. And even then, I told people in my family, even if we run the gauntlet here, win these last three games, get 2 points, get 6 points, I don't think it's still maybe out of our hands. Like we could totally win out all these last three games, and it may not matter. And that's sort of that again. I'm repeating from earlier. That is what happened, and it's Patrick Waugh's fault, and I'll get to that later. Um, which is a really funny scapegoat for Wings fans for well, Wings fans of my age that know that what that means. Um, anyway, yeah, no, that the last on Monday night. Let's start with that. I want to kind of go through this real quickly ish. Hit the bullet points. Um, yeah, Monday night the game against Montreal, the last home game for the Wings. Level of hype anticipation for I think most fans was just through the roof. And I talked to people that were at that game in person. And yeah, it was like that in the building too, from what I heard. Very improbable comeback win. Because I think they were down 5-3 going into the third period and managed to pull it out, including a very late game, goaltender pull, 6-on-5, Raymond scored, goes to overtime, Raymond scores overtime. Like, okay, like that. And for me at least personally, there was a lot of cheering that game. Also because DeBrincat got off his little scoring schneid earlier because he hasn't scored a goal in like a month. That's not exaggeration. It's probably been longer than that. When I go break down the season, I'll look at those actual numbers and see what that was like. Not his fault. It wasn't like, oh, he's inconsistent, which I'm sure is what the local press is saying because when I started getting back into the Wings early this year and was looking at local press, I got very annoyed by them very quickly because they would point fingers and blame people that Eh, no, I'll leave it no comment. It frustrated me a little bit. Um, because I'm sure the second that there were three games where DeBrincat didn't score a goal, I'm sure some local people, fans, and the press were saying, "Oh well, like, now he's inconsistent. He's look at this like just pointing fingers in all the wrong directions." Like, did you watch the game? Like, he had very good chances, just happened at the post, and it was just kind of DeBrincat had a string of a bad luck for like a month and a half. It was as a goal scorer, it was painful to watch because I knew he's taking chances, taking really good shots on net, just not quite getting there. Just barely, game of inches, as we always refer to hockey as, because it is. But yeah, no, in that Montreal game, he got scored. That was probably my biggest reaction was honestly not even the overtime stuff and all that. It was early in the game when DeBrincat finally scored. I'm like, yeah, it was yeah, I was very happy for that. I know what that's like as a goal scorer and you're not scoring goals for an extended period and how that weighs on you. And I get it. So just very, very happy to see DeBrincat get a goal. In that first Montreal game, I think maybe both of them. I'll have to look at them. No, I know the first game for sure. Yeah, I don't think he did the second one on Tuesday or last night. Yeah, no, he didn't. Even though most of that first game was dominated by Raymond because he ended up having a hat trick with both the game tying goal that was in the last couple seconds ish, and the overtime goal to complete the hat trick for Raymond. And his legend will continue the next night. Uh, yeah, no, but that first game, the Monday night game in Montreal, the last home game for the Wings this year. Yeah, that was something. Again, probably the most fun I've had watching hockey in at least a decade. It was just kind of amazing to watch how that game played out and the flow of it and everything. And I know people make comparisons, and they will. We'll be talking about this probably for years of this season, the way it ended with this home Montreal and these two games that were kind of on paper similar to me, totally different vibes, and we'll get into that. I'm not gonna do it now because I said that Monday night game, the home game, very different vibe, very celebratory, very just like yeah, we're still in it. We're keeping that up. Tuesday night's game, very different vibe for me personally. Um, that may have had something to do with the fact that I went to go take a nap before the game and ended up oversleeping, so I missed the first. Like I woke up and I'm like, "What time? Oh, it's 8 o'clock. Oh crap, it's 8 o'clock." I missed the first period, so I jumped in that game when it was still tied 1-1. Because, well, I'm jumping ahead here. Should probably go back because in between those two games, again, I did get really close to recording a little video reaction of like, because at a certain point in that first game, Monday Night Montreal, with about 10 minutes or 11 minutes ish, yeah, about 11 minutes left in the third period on Monday night, the Wings are still down 5-3. Just looking at it, and like that feeling of dread is starting to creep in. Like, yeah, no, this is so things are gonna end, not with a bang, with a whimper, just kind of, which well, sort of seen that before, but it's always been playoff losses, not a regular season thing. Not when we were close again. Generally, like I said, I've lived a lifetime where the Wings are either perennial playoff team or completely out of it. There's never been an in between until this year. Um, so again, unique experience, which I want to share. That's why I'm wearing this shirt. This is also a unique experience I'll touch on because there are some parallels and echoes that I do want to bring up for fans that will recognize them. I'm sorry for the memories in advance. um, no, I watched, or no, I was saying going. There was a certain point in that Monday night game with Detroit Montreal, and they're down 5-3 with like 11 minutes left in the third. It's like, oh man, because in my head I'm like, I know I have to make a somewhat video thing, just talk about the season, just kind of recap it. I'm like, do I have to, like, because in my head, I'm like, oh, the season's going to die right now. We're not going to win this game and we're done. That's it. So I should probably make my season recap video after the game. That's all I'm really thinking about as a couple of, 20 seconds are going on in game. There's another stoppage. And then Octopus gets thrown on the ice because, Detroit, that's what we do. There's a whole thing there. Won't go into it. If you know what you know, you know. That gets clean or starts to get cleaned up, is almost finished getting cleaned up off the ice. A second one is thrown on the ice, which, yes, if you know what that symbolizes, I guess there should be two of them because you need 16 wins to win a Stanley Cup. And honestly, as a fan watching that game at that point, I was like I didn't energize me at all. It was like, these are desperation octopi because if the fans in the building are feeling the same vibe I'm feeling at home watching this game of like we're just watching the clock run down in the season right now. Like it's kind of depressing. These feel like desperation octopus at the time, at least it felt like that to me. And then the next shift or two, I don't know if it was the very next shift after this little delay, but it was within two shifts. It was very close. We got back in the game, kind of scored a goal. I think scored. was the Brinket? He scored early. Someone put a look in that. Doesn't really matter who. We got back. Wings got back in the game. Suddenly 4-3 or 5-4, I should say. Montreal's lead. So, well, we're back in it. We're one goal game. But again, that homie had totally different vibes to the other one, and I'll get into that. Um, But yeah, it, apparently the octopus worked. At the time I saw it, I didn't feel that way. I was more so just kind of in a more depressed state of like, now I got to talk about the end of the season, and just the season's not going to end with a bang, but a whimper, very T.S. Eliot, which is fine. I would have been okay with that. Um, After what the team showed this year, which is a lot of promise going forward. So that's in my book, yeah, it's all good. I I've literally been expecting the season to be over for the last three games, but Toronto and the home with Montreal. So I'm like, yeah, it's just like this is we're done here. Let's just accept our fate and look try and looking forward to next year and years beyond next year. I think there's a lot of good things to be excited about going forward. Um So to say that the team surprised me Monday night with this come from behind and then overtime win to get those 2 points, it's like, oh, that was definitely a big celebratory moment for me, and I think a lot anyone else fans. I've talked to people that were literally at that game, and like, yeah, that overtime goal was the loudest that building's ever been. And broadcast said that too at the time, but I did reconfirm with a friend who's been there. It's like, yeah, oh yeah, that was the way he described it was actually pretty beautiful. The way he typed it out of that moment. I'm like, oh, that's well written. That's why I copied this quote and reused it on a Facebook post, or not for myself, but just talking to him about that game. And one of my comments too at the time, this is a comment before the last night's game to Tuesday, the last game against Montreal. I said, yeah, I wish that could have been the last game of the season. Because what a great high note to end on. What an emotional, like, come from behind victory. Like, it was an amazing game to watch as a Wings fan. Like, that, yeah, that would be nice if that was the end of the season. Because in my head, I'm still like, we're, we're not going we're not going to do that again, especially at home against Montreal for their last game. Doesn't matter the roster standings. You're playing Montreal at home in their last game of the season. That's not an easy win. I don't care who you are or what either team's roster is. There's just a certain atmosphere to those games that's going to give them a huge boost and a big advantage. And again, we came out this huge comeback emotional win Monday night. I'm like, okay, well, now we have to repeat that in a harder scenario at their building. Not gonna. I'm like, it's not gonna happen. Like that was a miracle. The game we had at home in Detroit, that was a miracle win by itself. That shouldn't have happened. In my own head, just knowing statistics and sports, I'm like, they're not going to repeat that the next night. It's impossible. You can't top that game. And I don't think they did. Well, yes and no. Because like I said, the vibes I had personally from those two games, or even though they were back to back and oddly played out very somewhat similarly. Very different vibes on both those games. Again, that's partially probably my own fault. As I said yesterday before Tuesday's game, I wanted to go take a pregame nap, so to speak. Didn't set an alarm 'cause it was so early in the day. I'm like, don't worry about that. I'll be up before the game. And I slept until like 8 o'clock. I woke up, looked at my phone, like, oh, 8 p.m. Oh, crap. And then, yeah, I missed the whole first period of that game. Still tied 1-1. So I'm like, okay, fine. No one did anything ridiculous and just catch up. Which, that's happened a couple times this season, but not a big deal. Oh, sorry. This is, man, almost like someone do a second take because it tells you, even though I've had a whole 12 hours ish to collect my thoughts, they're still very scattered. I was going to say during the Monday night um, game against Montreal at Little Caesars Arena. There's a certain point, again, the Wings are down 5-3, and it's about halfway through the third period. I don't know if we're going to come back on this one. There was a play that happened that gave me a weird flashback to this 2009, the Game 7 2009 matchup with Pittsburgh and Detroit. That's one of the reasons again I chose to throw this shirt on I've not worn since 2009. Because there was a lot of hype around that about that rematch. Because it's a fun concept. Almost never happens in pro sports, so it's cool. Um, the only thing about that 2009 series I remember is literally the very basically last play of the game when there's like 5 seconds left and we want to face off. Lindstrom had a shot from the point to hit the post and bounced out. It's like, oh, that would have been the tie of the game to maybe go, to go to overtime and then who knows. But still, it was as a Wings fan, in the 30 something years I've watched the team, that is the hardest loss. Was that 2009 Game 7? Hands down. I jokingly, when I went to the Rangers game with my friend, I referenced that at one point in conversation. I'm like, that's the Baltimore series that we don't talk about. We just don't talk about that year. Like 2009 doesn't exist. We ignore it because yeah, that one it still stings. Honestly, it still does. But yeah, the only thing I remember about that playoff series to this date was that last play, that Lindstrom post hit. It's just, burned in my mind. That close. Maybe, again, would have tied the game, but still. But yeah, that first Montreal game, kind of late going before the octopus stuff happened. There was a very, very similar play where we had an offensive zone face off against Montreal, went back to the point, hit the post, bounced out. It the way it looked, the way the play played out, and the camera angles and the way the puck bounced off, like man, I had a major flashback to that 2009 series. That's when my heart kind of sank. I was like, yeah, we're not gonna win this one. And then there was stoppage and the octopus happened. I talked about that, but I just wanted to go back and touch on that moment again. That's why, for the first time in a long time, I'm wearing this shirt again because it feels appropriate for what just happened. Um, in terms of like I mean, no, the 2009 was way more gut wrenching than this end of this year was. That's night and day comparison because it's different being on the verge of a Stanley Cup win to a verge of a playoff spot. But yeah. Anyway, to go back to that second game against Montreal, the one that happened last night. Again, I probably should have recorded a thing on in the moment, but if I did, it would have been a long ranty thing of like 45 minutes. I realize this video is already half hour. I'm already ranting. Mission not really accomplished. But I don't really care. Obviously, this is a live stream, so hey, live. There are no second takes. That Montreal game last night, again, for me, totally different vibe than the other. The one literally, this felt like a mini playoff series, almost in a weird way, even though Montreal was not in the mix of playoffs. But the intensity of the games, because they were basically, and I think even Reimer said this in his post game um, thing after the game last night. Like, yeah, it felt like Game 7, kind of scenario. And yeah, I felt like the last 3, 4, 6 games for the Wings this year have been elimination playoff kind of game. Really, actually, most of the year, the Wings, one of the reasons I've been telling people to go watch the Red Wings because every game feels like a playoff game because all these points are going to matter because it's that close and that tight. And that's why it's been a really fun season to watch. But I'll get into that later. Again, I'm right here, right, mostly just trying to, um, and I want to get my thoughts and emotions about these two Montreal games just on the record. Then I'll recap the whole season later on in a bit, uh, in the next couple days, because I got to do a bracket. That's a whole other conversation. Sorry, on the bracket. Oh boy. Um. Anyway, yeah. I overslept this first period, but despite as much as that second game had very similar shades to the first game in terms of like Wings are trailing, come from behind, win at the last second. And this, to me, again, very different vibe to me personally as a fan. Um, the first game was like, hey, yes, let's go win this and keep us in the race. That will be surprising. Tuesday night was more like, okay, maybe, okay, even if we do win this game, there are other things that are outside of our control that I have to keep an eye on. So there was not as much enthusiasm. I think from a fan side, for me at least, for that game. Um, because I knew that everything hinged on that Washington Philly game that was happening simultaneously. And this is one of the times I'm very glad that I'm alive in the era I was at because I'm able to look at one monitor, watch and listen to the Wings game and look over to my side and like, okay, what's Philly Washington do? You know, I can keep an eye on that in real time, watch that game too. And I will say it was definitely a very unique experience. Um, not just as a Red Wings fan, but as a hockey fan. Um, to basically have to watch two games at once because they both equally mattered in terms of what I want to happen to my team, just to make playoffs, which required Washington to lose to Philly. That game was critical. Basically, not even Detroit's hopes. Even like that one game affected like four different teams in terms of the stat. It was yeah, it was something. But yeah, the way it played out in real time, watching it, that was something else and an experience. Um, because again, I'm assuming you're watching this, you probably know what happened. Not gonna be breaking news. They're like, oh, we won or lost. No, you know the scores and kind of roughly know what happened. Because yeah, the Wings came back again from a lesser um, gap in terms of goals and the way the game felt. Wasn't as big of a sort of comeback until the end because Montreal iced the puck, which probably shouldn't have been icing call. But we'll take it. Because again, and I think the refs were probably the same. But like, there's 5 seconds left on the clock. Yeah, just give them the offensive zone face off. It probably doesn't matter because statistically, it doesn't. You know, pulling the goalie on offensive zone face off with 5 seconds left in the game when you're down by a goal, 90. I don't know what the actual metrics are. I'm just literally pulling numbers out of the air. I don't know what the actual numbers are. They're probably less than what I'm quoting. Because I'm an old school hockey guy, so I'm not familiar with the analytics of present day. But 90% of the time you do that, you have 5 seconds left, and you have the goalie out, and you got 6 on 5. You can try, but you're probably not going to score a goal to tie it. It's sort of the equivalent of the onside kick in football. It's a very low percentage play. It's just like your team, you're just hoping and clawing of like maybe we can do this. And the Wings, and they did. Perron scored off a point shot with 3 seconds left on the clock when it went in. I didn't even cheer or celebrate. I was literally kind of in shock and awe. Like they 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 actually they actually did it. Wow. That was my pretty much genuine reaction. I said that out loud to no one other than myself in the moment. Again, no cheering, no celebrating, just honest shock of like, oh, we actually tied the game. Okay, there's still a chance there because I know on broadcast they did present this scenario where technically Detroit could have lost, or if they went to overtime that game and at least got a point, they would still be in the race if Washington won. And then what happened to Pittsburgh game the next night? I think it was kind of not convoluted, but it's like okay, even if we get this to overtime, there's still a little light at the end of the tunnel, a little dim hope. But yeah, I didn't celebrate that goal that went to overtime. I was again genuinely shocked to basically not having words of just like, oh, again, I did react eventually. Oh wow, we actually scored. Okay, oh, all right. I was almost at a loss for words of again. There was no celebration, unlike the home game, where there was plenty of cheering for me. My family heard it from the other room. They knew what was going on. Very excited for that game. A lot of fun. The last game, not so much because it's like, okay, yes, we have to win this, but other things have to happen that are beyond our control. And again, watching this in real time and the way it played out was bizarre. One of the weirdest things well, not weirdest, maybe, but a unique moment in watching hockey for 30 years ish. Not more than that, but rounding down. Uh, because again, if you're watching these all in real time, which I was, because I had a feed, I watching the Wings game, and I'm also watching the Philly Washington game over here to the side on a separate screen in real time of what's happening. Because yeah, the second that Perron scored that goal to tie the game up and send it to overtime, again, I didn't cheer, wasn't excited. I was more so shocked and surprised that actually happened. And my focus immediately turned. I'm like, okay, well, it's 1-1 Washington Philly. I'm like, all right, Philly, you want to score a goal here? That'd be great. Just I immediately go from like that to one thing to the other. Like, okay, what's actually important here? Um, yeah, it was something else to watch again in real time. The way this unfolded, because yeah, this is the. I'll give you the rough timeline of what it was like to watch this in real time. Again, Detroit scores. Brown scores that goal to tie the game up, sent overtime. You glance over at the Philly game, they're in the third period. It's 1-1. I'm like, all right, well, nice if you could win this game, Philly, because that's literally all we can do at this point. If we win overtime. If. Um, and then we did win overtime. But at that point, because Philadelphia needed 2 points in regulation to break the tiebreaker to actually get in the playoffs. So it was one of those weird scenarios that almost never happens, but this is one of those cases where, yes, it does happen. Where they're tied 1-1, and Philly's going to pull their goalie in the third because they need to win in regulation to make the playoffs. Because that's the way the race fell, or the playoff race in the East kind of just worked out. Philly was in a spot where they had to win that game in regulation for a tiebreaker. So they had to pull their goalie when the game was tied. And yeah, Washington scored and ended up winning that game 2-1. But the way those, I say that, but the way it played out again in real time, watching all this stuff, fascinating. Because again, Detroit ties the game to go to overtime off that Perron goal at the last second, off the point to tie it by miraculous standards of like a 1 in 90 or whatever chance that play has, which is not high percentage. And I'm looking at the Washington Philly game like they're still tied 1-1. This could go either way as they go into overtime. A lot of uncertainty. Like we have to win the overtime. We have to get the 2 points and Washington has to win. So it's and I do appreciate maybe one of my favorite broadcast moments in recent history between Ken Daniels and Mickey Redmond calling the Wings game is at one point in I think it was during the overtime or late in the overtime. Ken Daniels pointed out like to Mickey Redmond, we've been working together for 37 years. This is the first time we've called two games at once because they were basically doing play-by-play on the Washington Philly game because they were watching it too because it mattered in that moment what was going to happen. And yeah, it was just crazy the way things unfolded. And again, in real time, watching both those games simultaneously as I was doing, and a lot of people were doing, including the broadcast team, and also people behind the wings bench because we'll get to that. Um, yep, wings going to overtime. Overtime resolves itself. So hey, we're going to a shootout. There's obviously a little break there. During that little break between the end of overtime and that shootout, Washington won that game. It was over. Game ended, I think, 2-1 final. Again, because Philly had to pull their goalie to try and win in regulations, so they scored an empty net. That's it. 2-1 game. It's done. So, like, oh, that's like I remember watching. There were 7 seconds left. Philly had a face off in their, in the offensive zone. Same situation the Wings were just in with Montreal, but the Wings scored on it, and like, yeah, and Philly did because again, it's a very low percentage chance to score in a couple seconds there up that face off. Even with the man advantage, it's not likely, which is what happened with them. So yep, it was weird to watch, and it dawned on me a little before, uh, slightly before the shootout started, kind of in that small gap of when I'm really focused on the Washington Philly game, and the irony hit me. I was like, oh, the two teams that we swept in 97, 98 in the finals, Philadelphia and Washington, now determine our fate this year for the playoffs. I'm like, okay, well, it's been 25 years. I guess you guys get your revenge, especially Washington fans, because they actually made the playoffs now. So you're welcome, I guess. 25 years later, sorry for the sweeps and the Cup 2-1. Now you get to push out of the playoffs. It's fine. But no, it was very weird to watch it in real time uh, because it was happening in real time with the players and the team. And that's what was talked about in some of the post game stuff. Because, yeah, they were, again, and the way Kane tells the story is like some players knew, but not everyone on the bench knew before that shootout. But some, it was starting to like trickle down of like, yeah, Washington won that game, so none of this matters. All the effort we just put in the last couple of days and this crazy push for the playoffs to come in real hot, none of it matters because we're out of the race now because Washington won. So this shootout's just, yeah, again, according to King, he didn't know that as they went into it. Yeah. Everyone else on broadcast, me as a fan watching, knew that, like, oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't do my my flag joke. 47 minutes, and I totally forgot the joke I planned for all this. I guess I'll save it for the season recap because it'll encapsulate the season. A flag wave and then being like, oh, I guess we're going home now. Because again, this is ran way longer than I thought. We definitely ranted way too much and not been focused. My own fault. But again, it's a weird thing to see as a Wings fan. We've not really seen this kind of end to a season before. Not in my lifetime at all. Where we end the season on a really high note. Honestly, a really great high note of like, wow, look at what this team is when like, we're gonna look back at the season. I'll say more of these thoughts for my overall season review in a couple of days when I really break down segments and look at different things. It's like, wow, what a great end to this season. Like, I really couldn't have imagined a higher note to go out on for this team. Uh, it feels like the core the core team we have moving forward with Larkin, Raymond, and Sider, like especially Raymond, especially. Oh boy, Raymond's getting all the money in the offseason, but in his contract, especially after the last 2 games or 3 games. But no, Raymond and Sider are both. I don't know if there really were question marks from fans coming into the season, but they were clearly answered by this result of the season. We watched both those guys kind of mature and come into their own, and I don't think either one of them has hit their ceiling yet of what they're capable of. So, and that's for Raymond, that's saying a lot. He's going to be a big game player at big times, so that's going to matter going forward. That's why he's going to get all the money in the offseason. A huge contract, which is going to affect the cap and well, other topics for other times. But um, yeah, it's. I will say this. Just the way things played out again in real time, watching the scores of just like the team coming back, even more improbably. Again, I didn't even celebrate that tying goal. I was just more shocked that it happened. Like, oh, this is plausible. again, my focus kind of shifted to the New York Philly games. Like they have to win this. Like this is out of our hands, sadly, but it's up to two other teams. And it just, yeah, really, there's no comparison as a Wings fan. Again, we've either been a perennial playoff team or missed the playoffs. There's never been a bubble situation, and never like this, where we kind of had to go on this ridiculous run at the end of the year, win these last three games to even really be in the conversation. And we did that, and we're still out of the playoffs. So it's very weird to have, especially these last three games, Toronto, Montreal, Montreal, big emotional wins for the team and the fans. Like such a high note. Had they made the playoffs, I don't care who they're playing first round. It would have been New York, but still. And I would have preferred Boston, because I think Detroit's a better matchup there. But as I told a friend of mine in between those two Montreal games, like the more you know, like if we somehow manage to beat Montreal again tonight at home, which will be harder than last night, even though that was a miracle victory. Like if we can do that, then we're gonna be coming and we can and Washington loses, we get that playoff spot. The Wings are coming in hot to the playoffs, which is scary. That's like all the makings for a first round upset are in place, with no matter what team they're playing. That's again why this is so kind of just. That's why I have to wear this, because it's a lot of sting for this season. I think for a lot of fans, not for the last few games. Again, I think the team ended the season on a really good high note. If you look at the whole season back, like yeah, they came together as a team. They kind of established, I think, maybe the identity of this team moving forward, which is good. I'll talk about that more when we do a whole season recap. I really just want to focus on the Montreal games and my emotions going through them. I just didn't realize it was going to still take an hour of ranting. I wanted to say this so it wouldn't be as long, but hey, guess what? It's this long. So yeah, it was definitely, as a Wings fan, a very unique end to the season. Something I've not seen before. Because again, Detroit's generally not been in like a playoff race in the year. Generally, they're either way in the playoffs or way out of the playoffs. It's one of the two. So yeah, the race at the end of the year was really fun, very entertaining to watch. And yeah, I think the last few games of this season kind of encapsulate what I've been trying to tell people most this year about the Red Wings of like, I don't care if they lose the game. It's still really fun to watch. Like it's really entertaining. It's entertaining. Maybe it comes from biased place as a former hockey player, but yeah, I get it. It's really fun to watch though. Really entertaining games. Because a lot of them come down to the wire. And I think I'll look at the final stats here, which I'll do for my like final season review. We either tied or passed New York for third period comeback wins of those last two games there. The last three even. I don't know if we were trailing Toronto. I forget. It's been a long couple of days as a hockey fan, or as a Wings fan in particular. Again, there's a reason I thought about recording this last night, but I'm like, well, let me sleep on it and kind of collect my thoughts a little bit here. And then I realized I can't really do the reviewing Montreal and recapping the season in one video because it would be way too long. This has already gone on way too long of just me ranting about hockey for an hour about literally two games and some side stuff. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, I think, for now. And yeah, I'll be back because I want to talk about, again, I'll definitely go through part of the reason this took so long to upload or to get to doing this video is because after the after last night's game between Detroit and Montreal wrapped up, and then the other Eastern games were also finished up, like, oh, we finalized what the Eastern Conference playoff bracket looks like. So I got to see that for the first time. Like, this is the matchups, and just it kind of broke my brain because I'm like, I, I can I flip coins? I don't know how to predict this. It's going to be very interesting, and Yeah, I have not made my bracket yet because there's still a couple games to go tonight and tomorrow that will solidify the Western Conference setup. We know the teams, the eight that are in it, just who's going to play who in the first round is kind of up in the air still. Either way, that's also not much harder to predict. I think the East is harder to call, but than the West, but we'll see. I could be totally wrong about that. That will be a whole separate thing of pretty soon. Once the spots are solidified before the playoffs start, I am gonna go pick a bracket, which is oh man, I'm not looking forward to that because again, I looked at the Eastern Conference bracket after it was set, and I'm like, I have no idea. I that uh, again, kind of speechless, just like hmm, I don't know. It's gonna be a very unpredictable playoff season this year. I'm really looking forward to watching it. It's gonna be a lot of fun, I think. It sucks Detroit's not in the mix because again, they got hot at the right just the last couple of games is on fire. Coming into the playoffs that way, it makes you a dangerous team that can potentially pull one of those weird first round upsets. Like Detroit could have beaten the Rangers. Maybe. Maybe. Beyond that, who knows? And I never saw this team as going I saw maybe they could be a playoff team. If they go deep, lucky, but I didn't never see this as like in contention, just in the mix of being in that playoff conversation again, which they are. And unfortunately, I think the offseason is going to be very interesting, and so is next year for this team because there's more than likely going to be a very big Patrick Kane shaped hole in the roster. I don't think he's staying. I don't think he ever intended to stay more than a year. He never said that. That's just my reading into things personally, looking at all the little details of stuff. Um, I I have off-season predictions for the Wings, but not really the time and place for that now because that's a whole other topic, and this has already gone on way too long. I've been talking about basically the last two games of the season, but wow, what a season! Honestly, what a finish. I'm really actually I'm yes, like everyone, disappointed that they missed the playoffs, but looking at those last three games, the Toronto and the home Montreal, what a way to finish the year. This was a statement season for the team and for especially several players in particular moving forward, mostly Raymond and Sider who have contract years, especially Raymond, because oh boy, I mean he was already getting paid before this happened, but he's getting all the money because the way contracts work. It's no longer about what you did, it's what you can do in the future. And yeah, Raymond's upset. I don't he's not even peaked yet. So the potential there for him as a goal scorer in the future is off the charts right now. So expectations are very high for him and Sider, I think, going next season because they're gonna sign big, massive contracts over the offseason here in the next few months. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see those numbers compared to what the salary cap is and what other moves Eiserman wants to make. Because again, I don't think Patrick Kane's staying, but again, this is a longer conversation to get to with the offseason kind of recap thing. And because I've got some speculation for the offseason and one very bold prediction for a free agent signing I think may happen. I'm optimistic that it will happen. I would like to happen, or like I would like it in a world where we keep Patrick Kane, he stays on the team, and then we sign. Uh, but yeah, it's we'll get to that at a later time. I'm literally clicking close to an hour, so I should probably really stop. Again, I do this as a live stream, so because video editing stuff was being funky. And yeah, I'll circle back to what I said at the beginning of this, just because hey, why not bookend things? I do apologize for the somewhat poor audio video quality. I'm literally just doing this off my laptop on the fly. I have better equipment sitting in the corner in terms of microphones and lighting, and I need to build out a set, not in this corner, but other places in the room. I just haven't done it yet. So it's just kind of makeshift. And again, it won't be all hockey here, but right now it's the end of hockey season. So hockey's on my mind. I want to talk about hockey. And this channel's mostly an outlet for me to just talk to the void, have the camera shake. No, it's the laptop's on a stand. I changed it from yesterday because I'm like, oh, I forgot to put it on the thing so that the eye line's better. So my bad. Um, yeah, I guess that's it. We're going over an hour. I could probably keep going, but with random thoughts, and that's why I saved this video. Um, so I'm like, yeah, if I did it after the games, it would just be a lot of ranty, and it still was ranty, so it really didn't make it much of a difference. But hey, at least it's done now, and I can end this and upload it. And I gotta go play a lot of NHL because the weekly season for all the teams wrapping up, and I have obligations, stupid obligations. Like, oh, you gotta go play video game hockey. Yeah, 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 I kind of do. So very dumb, but welcome to being an adult. You do really stupid things. But happy to share this with you. If you've gotten to this point in the video, you've wasted an hour of your life listening to me rant about hockey. Thanks. And also sorry. But hey, you know what? It gave me an excuse to wear this shirt for the first time in a long, long time. And I probably won't wear it again until I go back and rewatch and review that series, which will be a while. That's not something I'm looking forward to doing, but I do want to do it at some point just to break it down again and look at it again from a fresh perspective. So that'll be in the future. Again, future plans. I have plenty of those, but let's take it day by day. And for now, like I said, I wanted to break down and just talk about those last two games. Detroit Montreal. Again, amazing. Just what a way to end the season. But also, and again, the I'm not going to include it here because that would require editing and also copyright laws. If you look at the Red Wings celebrate, like the end of that second game, in Montreal, like it's such a bizarre thing to watch if you know what's really happening, as I did in real time. Yes, huge game, come behind win, and we won a shootout. There's not really, it's a very muted, very reserved celebration by the team because they knew that it didn't matter. They found out again, basically right before that shootout, like this doesn't matter. The other game, yeah, we're out of it. Which again, it sucked. It's a very weird place to be in. Like such a high note. These last three games is such a great story, great high note to end the season on. That would have made an amazing story if they made the playoffs and then made a run. Would have been one of the most improbable things I've seen in hockey, maybe ever. Would have been that. Um, just the way things played out. So that was very special. Again, even the way things did play out, it was something special to watch. And again, I do think this was a statement year for the team moving forward. And I've made comparisons before. I'll do it again in much more extent when I break this whole season down. But I see a lot in this current team. I see a lot of shades of early, an emphasis on early '90s Red Wings. A lot of comparisons in terms of where they're at and maybe where they're going. I think they're on that same trajectory, and they're going to have to lose before they learn how to win. And this is part of that. This season, I think, is going to be a big chapter for the team moving forward. Probably a good one, honestly. Um, but we'll see how things play out. And I'll be back probably tomorrow, and I'll go do something more relevant than this. But I was just, about to jump on NHL, and I was like, oh, I should really get this video out of the way because I need to talk about those games that just happened before my memory goes too far away and I forget the details. Well, I'm still kind of sparse on, but I just wanted to get my overall emotional impression of those games, saved for posterity. Well, and for no one's sake other than my own, because hey, whatever. Anyway, I guess that's that. Um, it's Wednesday. A couple things to do. There are 2 more days left in the regular season. Oh yeah, I think next video will probably be brackets then. I'll go over the playoff bracket and my picks or my guesses. Really, I'm not even calling picks because I'm just grasping at thin air. But I my dark horse pick has sort of changed recently. I think the Islanders may make a run this year because Patrick Wallace came out of nowhere because we're coaching a team. Patrick Waugh has a history of just coming out of nowhere and doing amazing things. So, based on the past repeating itself, I would not be that shocked if the Islanders make a serious run this year because Patrick Waugh, which is mostly why Detroit ended up missing the playoffs. But that's a whole other story for a different time, and we'll get into that later. Um, but for at least the third time I can remember, for sure, there may be more than three. I can think of three distinctly, this being the third one. Where and this was obviously more indirect than directly, where Patrick Waugh just killed the Detroit Red Wings season again, because he did. If he hadn't taken over the Islanders coach and they weren't in the mix, but none of this would have happened. Uh, so, yeah, it's Patrick Waugh's fault, basically, is what I'm saying. Anyway, bye.